this is a subject everyone likes to know about and learn more about, is SAS selection. So before we break down the phases, I'd like to ask you a question of, generally speaking, the people that are successful, the 0.1% that actually make it through this process, what traits do they all typically tend to have, both physically and mentally? What's the trait that spans across everyone?
Yeah, I suppose it's a word that I found, which is drive. And, people, when I do talks around the country, people always tend to talk about this subject, about selection. They always say, look, we realize selection in the SES is very hard. It's 90% failure rate, over that. So this similar question, what does it take to get in? And I always say simply is that if anyone really wants something in life, and I remember when I was really hungry, I remember when I wanted this. And if you really want something in life, Lewis, you will do anything to get it. We have a saying up in the regiment which says, we will give everything if everything is what it takes. And as you can appreciate in the regiment, we come across some very, very difficult situations, very stressful situations. So to get in the regiment, I think it's what it says on the can. The selection process selects people, to be in a job which is going to be very, very hard, very, very stressful. So therefore, you need people that have got the traits, and the number one trait that I say that everyone needs is drive, that push. Do you really want this? Do you really want to get in the SES? Do you really want to live this lifestyle? Well, if you do, it takes phenomenal drive. And people say, well, how do you kind of look at drive, Des? And I just look at it simply. How much do you want something? And it can be anything, do you want to pass that degree? Do you want, that particular job? Do you want to do something which means something really important to you? So my mind goes back to when I made a decision in the paras that I wanted the SES. And I remember I got myself in a position, I feel like I prepared myself physically and mentally, and I had drive. So I said to people, pure and simply, it's as simple as this. Whatever you want, and for me, I wanted the SES, just build as much drive as you can, and it will be that will get you through. It's as simple as this. How much do you want it?
And I wonder, what was that drive for you, Des? When you're, say, running across the Welsh mountains, your lungs are burning, your legs are burning. What was the drive for you? What was the why? Why were you there? Why did you want it so bad?
Yes, again, the way to answer that, my mind goes back, is that I'd been in parachute regiments. In fact, I was there for 8 years. I'd signed up for 9, and round about the 6th, 7th year, I started to think to myself, well, soon, in the 9th year, I'm going to be getting out into Civvy Street, and that scared me. And I thought to myself, right, there's probably 3 things. I either get out into Civvy Street, I stay in the parachute regiment, which is good enough, or I get really serious about my career. And there's only one place that you go to, and that's to Hereford, in the army. That's SES. And in a way that I visualized success. I thought, right, I want to go further. I want to be the best I can. I'd heard everything about the SES, and that conjured up a picture in my mind of being ultra successful within the armed forces. So there it was in the paras, at a crossroads, if you like, and I got the drive to push forward and said, right, I am going to be successful, or as good as I could possibly be within my career within the armed forces. So that means leaving Para-Reg, preparing myself, moving forward, and volunteering for the SAS itself. So answering your question, long-winded answer, is that I visualized success within the SAS, and that epitomized the pinnacle, if you like, of being the best in the armed forces. So that in itself, being the best I could possibly be in the best unit within the armed forces and arguably within the world, I realized this is what I wanted to do. So it was that, okay, that gave me the drive to push forward and go on to the SAS.
Amazing. Well, if we break it down then, so let's say we arrive, it's phase 1. Everyone tends to know this is like the endurance phase in the Brecon Beacons, right? So in terms of the task you're presented with that's in front of you, what is exactly asked of you at this phase?
As a selection process, firstly, it's a volunteer basis. And there's 2 selections. There's a winter selection and a summer selection. And it lasts for 6 months. Myself, I volunteered for a winter selection. And I thought to myself, I tend to perform better in the colder weather than I do the hot weather. And there was another thing as well, is that there's less turn up on the winter than they do on the summer selection. I mean, when I turned up, there was about 280 people. In the summer, you can double that figure. So that's where it was. It's a volunteer basis. And I remember, Lewis, on the first day arriving there, I'd built myself up physically. I got my fitness better in Para-Reg. Mentally, what I did, I got my map reading skills up to par, my weapon training skills up, fitness, as I already said, and I did any preparation I could do to give me advantage on selection. And there I was on the first day with 280 guys, and the instructor at Hereford, and we were at the SAS base, if you like, and firstly he spoke to us normally. He said, "Welcome everyone. Could everyone please just look around at each other?" And what we did, we all looked around, and I'm looking at guys. I'm thinking, well, he looks fit, he looks prepared, he looks big, he looks tough, he looks the part. And we all thought it was a bit strange that he'd asked us to do that. And then he said, right, after 5 weeks, okay, you will be down to around 50 men. In fact, you'll be less than 50 men. Well, there was about 280 guys at the time. And I thought, wow. And he was doing that for a reason. He was doing it to psych you out. And it worked, because the next day when we actually started selection, there were 5 guys that didn't turn up out of the 280 odd. So that was the selection process to start with. It started to select the guys, okay, who were possible candidates for the SAS. And he did that purposely, just to show that, people give up from day one. And that was a surprise for everyone. So we started selection, and it's in 3 phases. The first phase is about 5 weeks or so, and it's navigation. It's going over the hills in Wales, where you come from, and it's fitness, and they are looking at you to see if you are fit enough and strong enough, and taking simple instructions going from A to B to C and so on, map reading over the hills. And that's the first phase. Then the second phase, after the short build-up, you go out to the jungle. And I say a short build-up because they get you ready for a couple of weeks, because most of the guys hadn't been out to the jungle. I'd never been out to the jungle. So they prepare you to go out to the jungle, and it's a very, very hard environment. And the reason they have the jungle phase within the SAS selection is that the regiment had a period, and they call it the Malayan conflict, in the 1950s. And the regiment was very, very successful. A very difficult environment and theatre to work in. So they keep that in selection, because again, we was down. I remember the first part of selection, which is the hills, as we call it. We were down to, again, just under 50 guys, about 45, 48. And then we come back from the jungle, and there was less than 10 guys. Okay. And then the last phase is escape and evasion and interrogation. And the remainder that are left on selection, they then have a scenario if you get separated from your patrol behind enemy lines. They teach you escape and evasion from the enemy. They teach you how to live off the land, how to evade the enemy. And then right at the end of selection, you go through a period of interrogation, okay, where they have you for 36 to 48 hours, and they have you in a pen with stress positions, blindfolded, and they have various interrogators try to break you to try and stop you from getting through selection. So it's 6 months, 3 phases, starting off on mine, 280 guys. By the end of it, there was less than 10 guys left.
And for you personally, out of those 3 phases you've touched on there, which one tested and challenged you the most, and why?
I would say the jungle phase, and actually most guys say that, is because firstly, it's an alien theatre. I'd never been there before. It's very, very testing. As you can imagine, out in the jungle, you're wet, very, very physical. Everything there in the jungle wants to eat you, bite you, carry you away. You have snakes, insects. You have, it's very, very humid, very, very hot. You're under the canopy all the time. The canopy is the trees. It's very rare you see the sky. So you are still trying to do soldiering skills. You are still navigating within the jungle. So you're still doing all the stuff that a soldier does, but it's in an environment that most soldiers haven't been in. You have trees that are always falling down. There's a thing called deadfall. And what it is, the trees tend to suck up water from the ground, and eventually the trees become dry and brittle, and they break and they fall, and they call it deadfall. And there's been quite a few guys being killed on selection. So it's a hard environment. It's a scary environment. And I think what it does, it tends to catch a lot of people out. Because most people haven't been there, it kind of sends the body into shock, if you like, and it takes quite a bit of discipline to be able to deal with the jungle itself. So at the beginning, it can be very, very, very testing within that environment. So I would say for me, the jungle was probably the hardest phase.
When I spoke to Chris Ryan, who's been on both sides of this, right? He took people through selection. He told me that what he was looking for was what they call the grey man, the man in the middle, the man who just gets on with it but isn't trying to show the instructor up or put pressure on them. Is that true from your experience, and was that in the back of your mind at all?
Yeah, and Chris had obviously gone through selection, then he become an instructor, and yes, he. I think this thing about the regiment where, and we joke about it, is that everybody expects guys in the SES to be like 6'5", 25 minutes across the chest, a tin of racks of grease in one end and a black whip in the other. When in actual fact, they're just normal guys. And as Chris has put it there, is that they're looking for the grey man. What they're actually looking for, the grey man, is a guy that gets on with the job, that doesn't whinge and whine and bellyache, is in a difficult situation, as you would expect within the SES. It's very stressful, everything you do. But they want in a guy, which comes part of the grey man, they want in a guy not to give up. Just to keep going, just to plod on, and I saw not only at the beginning of the selection, like I said, where guys gave up straight away, guys that gave up on the hills, guys that gave up in the jungle as well, but also there's that selection process there that has been there since the 1950s. And I point out to people that the selection process actually selects the guy for life within the regiment. And what the selection process does is that it puts the individual under physical stress, mental stress, and sleep deprivation stress. And then obviously the stress of the tasks that they give you to do on the first phase, middle phase, and the last phase. As Chris says, they're looking for a guy that can just keep on going, that can deal with the hardship, just take orders and just be quiet about it and just get on with the job, instead of whinging and whining and bellyaching. And I think the selection process is very good at that. Let's face it, as I said earlier on, you volunteer for the SAS, but it's the selection process that selects you. After all, everybody knows in the armed forces that when they go for selection, is that selection itself is going to be very, very hard. It's over 90% failure. And at the same time, they know that the life is going to be hard within the regiment. And then also, as I keep saying, it says it on the can, is that most situations, most jobs, most tasks that you come across within the SAS are going to be difficult, going to be hard, going to be stressful. So therefore, the selection process needs a certain type of guy. It needs a guy, as Chris says, a grey man, and someone that is not going to stop, just keep going, not whinge and whine, a bellyache, okay, and get on with the task in hand. Let's face it, most of the situations and tasks that we come across within the regiment are quite negative, but they wanting you to bring about a positive outcome. So therefore, that needs a certain type of guy. It needs a guy, as I said at the beginning, who has got that drive, that is willing to push through when the chips are down, when it gets hard. And as Chris said, you need a grey man who is just going to get on, get the job done, okay, without whinging, whining, bellyaching, and just do as he's told.
And I wonder if that's true in terms of SAS selection and just throughout your career in the military, that physicality, you mentioned earlier that you looked around you and you saw all these physical specimens, that physicality will only take you so far in this process. And it comes a point where you can be the fittest man on the planet, but there's a point where mental strength has to take over from physical, right?
Yes, I would agree with that. You know, we keep hearing about, you know, it's in the SF world, the Special Forces world, they keep talking about the SF mindset. And yeah, I'm talking about drive again and, you know, and the determination, and you've got to have discipline. You know, it all comes down to hard work, consistency, focus, discipline, you know, all the words and the traits that we know that goes into, to drive, if you like. Yes, is that the body, as you said, you can get it as fit as you can. And don't get me wrong, you've got to be as fit as you can. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be ready. But when the body gives up, and there's some days when the body does give up, I can remember, you know, some days, you know, you're going, oh, great, I feel good. But there's just some days I've got nothing. I've got nothing in the tank. Well, that's when the mind takes over. And this is where we talk about the SF mindset. And I think again, within the regiments, you know, I keep talking about these difficult situations. It's not for everyone, this sort of life, you know, and not only the tasks and the missions that you go on, but the life itself is quite arduous. So again, I come back to this selection process that we've had since the 1950s. It works. It's tried and tested. And as long as they keep this selection process, you will always keep getting the same guy. You know, it will churn out the same type of guy. You know, as I said, you know, if on selection, you'll come across something which is really hard, you'll decide whether you want it or not. And you can take yourself off any time and you can say, no, this is not for me. And that's a good thing, because guys find out fairly early on whether this is what they want or not. Now, the guys that really do want it, got that extra drive, it will be the selection process that selects them, that really decides. So at the end there is that what you're left with after 6 months is the guys that are ready for this sort of life within the SAS.
And whenever I've talked to people about SAS selection, and recently when I was speaking to Damian Lewis, he said the man you want to speak to is Des Powell, because he effectively went through it twice. So what point and why did that first attempt get cut so slightly short?
By the way, Damian Lewis, a great guy, great historian. He's probably the number one guy, writer, if you like, number one writer on this genre. He knows more about the history of the regiment than the regiment knows, you know. So he's written some great books, and especially the Second World War. series that he's written. So, and that was kind in him to say that. Obviously, people know that we did a book together. And yes, and we talked about that. I did 2 selections, and what it was, the first selection I got out to the jungle, and I got a sharp thorn through my wrist, and I had to be casevaced out to a medical centre and have the thorn taken out my wrist, and because of that, I had to come back on a second selection, go all the way through it again. And then I was in the jungle again, and this time I got injured again in the jungle, and I got chemicals burns on my leg. And luckily on that second selection, I'd almost finished the jungle phase. So I'd just a couple of days to go. But what I'd done, we were dealing with a balloon that you put up through the canopy, and there's certain crystals, if you like, that you add water to them. It creates a gas, inflates the balloon, and takes it up through the canopy, simply so a helicopter can see that there's a patrol there. It's used for picking up patrols, someone that needs to be casevaced, someone who's injured, etc., etc. But what I'd done accidentally, I got some of these chemicals on my leg, and I thought to myself, I thought I'd been bit by an insect or even by a snake, and I thought, oh no, here we go again, And at that time, luckily, a helicopter was just landing, and it was offloading supplies. And the RSM come over, says, right, get your trousers off, let's have a look. So there I am in the jungle with my trousers off, and the medic and the RSM is inspecting my leg. And he's saying, what have you done here? So I said, I don't know. I didn't know at that time that it was chemical burns, And the RSM said, right, get on that helicopter now. Of course, I started arguing. I said, well, no, look, I'm okay. No, you're not. You need to get to a medical centre. There's something wrong there. The helicopter's on the ground now. It won't be coming back, and it won't be coming back for days. You need to get on. So there it was. I had to run down to the basher, collect my kit, run back up to the helipad, and now I'm going towards the helicopter with no trousers on, and I could see the pilots kind of looking at each other. And there's a drill that you do before you get on the aircraft to kind of signal to the pilots that you wanted to come on. As you can appreciate, it's quite dangerous if you are approaching a helicopter because of the blades and what have you. And as a signal to them, they give me the signal to get on the aircraft. And I could almost see it now. I could see them looking at each other as much as, what's happening here? He's in the jungle, this guy's got no trousers on. And when I got on the chopper itself, is that the loadmaster that were on there, had a chat with me afterwards when they got me to the med centre, and said it was quite comical seeing you rushing towards the helicopter with no trousers on, and we're wondering what the hell had gone off like, sort of thing. And as you can appreciate, at the other end, I get off at a medical centre and they see this soldier that had been in the jungle for over a month, and he's getting off now with no trousers on. So it's quite a funny story that the guys had got about me, about, Des being in the jungle, wearing no trousers and whatever. Luckily, they managed to sort my legs out. It had blistered up from the chemicals that had accidentally fallen on me, on my leg. And in the med centre, they managed to sort it out. Luckily, I'd only got a couple of days to go, and I passed the jungle phase. So I had visions of going, oh no, deja vu. This is happening a second time. But luckily, I'd got far enough within the jungle phase.
I wonder, after that first time, where it was sort of taken out of your hands through injury, does any doubt creep in at that point, or do you start to maybe second guess yourself about going again, or did it give you even more motivation to just get back to it?
No, I knew what I wanted from the decision when I made it with Para-Reg, and I'd kind of set my stall out, sort of thing. And I decided, no matter what, I'm either going to get in, okay, or I'm going to fail trying. Now, the first time I did it, it's a strange feeling, is that you're very disappointed that you've failed. And by the way, if you're injured, that's a failure. It doesn't matter whether you've twisted your ankle or got a thorn through your wrist or burnt your legs with chemicals. If you don't make it to the end, it's a fail. So whichever way you look at it. Very disappointed, yeah, but I knew that I thought, no, I can do this, you know. So what happened on the second time round is that they tell me to go back to Para-Reg and said, right, selection's quite, you know, you need a rest. Go back to Para-Reg, have a rest, come back within a year. That's what most guys do. But I said to him, no, I want to come back straight away. I knew, Lewis, that if I left it any longer, I would lose momentum, you know, or something would happen which would stop me from coming back. So what I did, I went back to Para-Reg. I had a chat with the Sergeant Major who was very good. And I said, look, I need to go straight back. Will you allow me to start training for the next winter selection? You know, bear in mind, I'd just done 6 months, well, almost. And luckily he said yes. And I can always thank him for that, because that Sergeant Major could have turned around and go, no, we need you back here. We need you, you know, get some work done, and you need to go back within a year. But luckily, he saw that determination. I said to him, I goes, look, I have decided this is what I want. If I come back to Para-Reg and I lose momentum and I don't go back up for the second time, I'm going to get out of Para-Reg anyhow. You know, I decided this is what I wanted to do. I either want to get into the SAS or get out into Civvy Street altogether, you know. And that way I'm kind of burning bridges. And we hear about that, don't we, that of people who are very determined. They tend to burn bridges, don't they? And you know, I didn't turn around and have stick my chest out and go, you know, and kind of be funny with it. I kind of stated it in a direct manner, which I think people see that you're serious. And when I had a chat with the Sergeant Major back in Para-Reg, I said, look, I need to go back. This is what I want to do. I know I can do it. I know I can pass selection. But I don't want anything else to stop me. And he said yes. And I can always thank him for that, because he could have been awkward and said no, you know, but he didn't. And when I think back, you know, it's, you know, I kind of thanked him mentally, if you like. You know, I kind of went back to see him, but, you know, he's passed on now, you know, so may he rest in peace. He's a good guy. And I think of that decision could have stopped me from going forward and could have stopped my career. And he could see, I think, that I got that drive to push forward. And he said yes. So, you know, I was very thankful for him. And so answering your question, Lewis, is that it's a strange feeling, very disappointed that you fail, but know that when I go back, I'm going to get in because I know I can do this. And the second time around, that's exactly what I did. Even though I got injured again within the jungle, I managed to punch through and get through it till the end.
Amazing. What a story. And lastly, on selection then, before we move on, and I know this is hard to say because you wouldn't have experienced others, but many people cite the fact that the British SAS and the selection process is heavily influential around the world, and other countries and nations have sort of used it as a model to build their own, right? It's well known that the Americans came over to see it for themselves. I think New Zealand was similarly modeled on the UK. Where do you think that the UK selection process for our special forces sort of ranks in the world in terms of the toughest processes out there?
Yes, it's at the top. You know, it's number one. I think you're right there, Lewis. Everyone tends to know that most of the special forces around the world is based on the UK special forces, which is the SAS. So I can honestly say that we have the best armed forces in the world, and I've worked with a lot of foreign forces, and there's a lot of good ones out there. But you know, I would say we're at the top of the tree, and obviously I'm going to say that it's simply because you know I've served in the British Armed Forces, and that's not you know, slagging any of the other armed forces around the world, because there's some very good ones. But you've asked me a direct question. And I would say without a doubt is that we have the best special forces in the world. Our selection process is probably the hardest in the world. You know, it's over 90% failure rate. Just about most special forces organizations around the world are based on our system. Okay. And a lot of the time, our regiment is asked to train foreign forces around the world. So answering your question is yes, you know, and you've got to bear in mind why that is. I mean, you know, we were born in North Africa, you know, in the Second World War. So we've had a long time to develop as special forces. I mentioned about, you know, we had a Malayan conflict in the 50s. And the regiment has really started from the Second World War up to date. So we've had a long history. We've got better and better as time has gone on. And I think, you know, when other forces around the world look at us, you know, they say, yes, you know, we'd like to have a system like what the British SAS have got. We'd like to be trained by them. And I think that we have a format of success which really works. And I think that also proves the other special forces around the world, because it seems to work for them as well. So when they come to us, or they base it on our training, and when they come to us and ask us to train, I think they have a success format as well. As I said earlier on, if we're trying to analyze this, I think if there's anything which is, you know, pivotal, if you like, it's getting the right type of guy. And there has to be a process. And that process is the selection process. And we have to have guys that want to come. So that's why it's a volunteer basis. So when I come from Para-Reg, I volunteered. No one forced me. No one said you've got to go up there and you've got to do this. And by the way, when I first failed the first one, I volunteered for the second one. Okay, so they want guys that are volunteers. They want guys who want to be there. And then you go, right, if that's a selection process in itself, you know, I know in the armed forces, even in our armed forces, they make guys go on certain courses. They've got to do them. Some of it's for rank, some of it's to gain skill in certain areas. But for the SAS, they want a volunteer. So they want a guy there. And then when he's there, they need a certain selection process. And I've said earlier on, the reason to do that is because the job we do is very hard, very stressful, and it's not for everyone. So they have a selection process which selects that individual. And I think as long as they keep to this format, and I'm kind of repeating myself here what I said earlier on, but it's often said that as long as this selection process stays within the regiment, you will always get the same type of guy. As soon as they get rid of that format, I think that would be the downfall of the regiment.
Yeah, and let me just add some context to what you said, because I definitely don't think you're being biased, because we recently spoke to General Stanley McChrystal from the USA. This is a 4-star army general, the man who oversaw the operation of the capture of Saddam Hussein. And we asked him about his experiences with the British Armed Forces and where he thinks they rank in the world. And very similar to you, he said, look, we came over, he worked very closely with the 22 SAS. I believe he took a lot away to learn from. And he said what made the British Armed Forces so special and very different from America is that in America, it's very hierarchical. So a general, you speak when you're spoken to by someone above you. Whereas he said when he worked with British Armed Forces, there was more of a meritocracy, and that, you know, people below him in rank weren't scared to come up to him and say, General Stan, I think this. And he said at first he couldn't believe that people were sort of approaching him with ideas and speaking to him on that level. And he said it wasn't disrespectful at all. It was a very different experience to how they operate in America.
Yes, and I think in the regiments, the SAS is that it's a very casual approach, but everyone has a say in what we do. Is that yes, we have rank up there, but everything is by first names, but when a task comes up, when a mission comes up, and we've got everybody has a say in it. We might call it a Chinese parliament, but something will come up, a task, a mission, the patrol, let's say it's air troop and a mounted troop, boat troop, they will all get together. They will all have a say in how that task, how that mission will go. So it's what you bring to the table. It's not the rank itself. And I think that works. It works very, very well, as opposed to, yes, you have someone in charge and they tend to tell you what to do. And I think the regiment's very good is that, the staff sergeants, corporals, lance corporals, and the troopers, that is where the experience is. That, as you can appreciate, when guys volunteer for selection, it's from all areas of the armed forces, from the guards, it's from the signals, from the engineers, me, the paras. Okay. You've already got soldiers that have been in quite a few years. So they've already got that experience. So then when they go up and they take on selection, volunteering, and you get through selection, you have now got a guy that already may be a corporal, already be a sergeant, already had quite a few years. Like me, I'd had 8 years in parachute regiment. So I'd had quite a bit of experience. And now, okay, I'm up in the SES. Okay, you have to start again rank-wise. I started off as a trooper and then eventually made my way to be a sergeant major. But you still have the experience, and the regiment realizes this. So when a task, a mission comes up, everyone has a say in it. It's because that is where the experience lies. We always say in the regiment, the experience lies with the guys on the ground. So that's the staff sergeant, sergeants and below. And when a task is given to them, they decide how to carry that task out because they've already got their experience. And bear in mind, when you go to the regiment, for such as me, is that you pick a troop. Okay, and for me, it was air troop. As you know, there's air troop, there's boat troop, mountain troop, mobility troop. So air troop, okay, I specialize in high altitude free fall parachuting. Insertion, that's where I insert behind enemy lines, if you like. Okay. And then I specialize then in 4 areas, which would be medics, demolitions, signals, and languages. And each guy does that. So it's the same in mobility, it's the same in mountain, it's the same in boat troop. And so therefore, not only have you been experienced in the armed forces like I was in the paras, or if you come from the guards or the signals, is that you're already experienced soldier, but now you become more experienced as an SAS soldier. You specialize in an entry skill. My entry skill was free falling, and I specialize in them 4 areas. So you can appreciate, okay, how the experience of the regiment comes about. And I think that's another success format. We're already soldiers to start with. It doesn't matter whether we go into the anti-terrorist role or any other type of role, the Arctic role or the jungle role. We are soldiers to start with. We've already got that experience. And now within the regiment, now we are taking on that special forces experience of what I've just described. So that's quite a formidable individual, bearing in mind you've come through a selection process, and you can see by what I've just explained there, the strength of the regiment itself is within the men on the ground that are actually carrying through on the task. And I think that is very, very important.
I wonder, is there maybe a moment or an operation or something throughout your career, whether it was in the parachute regiment, whether it was in the special forces, that you think back on now and think that was the moment that required or tested my mental strength the most?
Oh, let me think. There was quite there's so many times. Okay, let me generalize here. Okay, yeah. and I'm generalizing because your audience will understand. And I specialized in air troop, which is high altitude free fall parachuting. So it's not something I'd done before, even though I come from parachute regiment. The parachuting there is different. It's static line parachuting, where this now is going up to a height of over 30,000 feet. Okay, that means you need oxygen. That means when you exit the aircraft, you are free falling for over 2 minutes. Okay, and you are now in the aircraft on oxygen, carrying your equipment, and you are ready for exiting the aircraft. And bearing in mind is that you will be free falling for 2 minutes. It could be at night with equipment, with containers, with weapons. you'll be reaching speeds of excess of 120 miles an hour. Okay. And you've got to carry out certain drills, okay, within the aircraft, within the air. And this itself, you know, is very, very dangerous. And it's not for everyone. It's very, very scary. And I don't mind saying that. Is every time I used to jump on oxygen at altitude, you would always feel the tension. There's so many things that can go wrong. And remember, that's just the form of transport. Once you are on the ground, then you've got to carry out the mission. To give it kind of context is that I would do that fairly regular. And I'm doing it with other guys. So when you exit the aircraft and you are in the sky, you're all looking at each other. You're looking at the altimeter. By the way, your goggles are misting up. If it's in a cold climate, your altimeters are misting up and not working. Sometimes your oxygen plays up. Sometimes you bump into each other in the sky. Sometimes there's equipment that you take, which is separate in the sky, and sometimes that bumps into you as well. So as you can appreciate, this is a very, very dangerous technique, if you like. And so hopefully your audience has kind of got some idea of what type of things you have to do when you have got a certain mission to carry through it. Emphasizing again, this is only a form of transport coming from the aircraft and landing on the ground. Then you've got to carry out the mission itself, and that's where then the soldiering aspect comes in, and then you've got to push through and carry out the mission and the task itself. So when you ask me, is the a moment that, you know, that kind of defined anything in the regiment, there's many, many moments. And I kind of just generalize that one just so, you know, people may be able to get a feel. You can appreciate that there's many missions that you get on, you know, working in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and all around the world. And those themselves are very, very stressful and hard. But, the life of a soldier itself, all I can ever remember of soldiering is, you know, you're cold, you're wet, or you're either hot and tired, and it's hard work. And to carry out a certain task that you've been asked to do, you know, as I keep emphasizing, takes a certain individual, and to work closely as a unit together, and to be able to carry through on these tasks and hopefully have a successful outcome is, as a soldier, is a very, very satisfying feeling.
When you think of all the people you've served alongside over your career, is there a certain person, or is there anyone in particular, and you don't have to name names, that sort of stands out in your mind and you think that person embodies everything that I think a good soldier is?
I think when I look over my career, and I had 28 years, you know, in the armed forces, you know, 8 in para-reg and almost 20 within the regiment. I think there's always been, you know, people that are, you know, mentors, if you like. You know, at times when I've looked at people, I go, you know, I want to be like him as a soldier. I've been in a situation when, you know, you look how this guy performs as a professional soldier, and you think, oh, that's what I want. And probably answering your question, when I went up to the regiment at the beginning, when I got through my 6 months training and then went to the squadron, I had Squadron Life, is that you had what we call the old and bold here. And you used to look at these guys and think, wow, you know, they've been here for some years, and, you know, and you were mixing with guys that had, you know, that had rode parts of the Atlantic, guys that had climbed Everest, guys that had you know, done freefall records, guys that had done canoeing records, you know, guys that had been on languages for 18 months, guys that had been out to Germany and been on a mountain guides leader course, and you go, wow. So all of a sudden you are dealing with guys that at a very high echelon. And the good thing about that, Lewis, is that, you know, when it brings you up. You know, you all of a sudden join a regiment and go, wow, this is what it's about. These are the guys. These are what I've heard about. And now you're amongst them. And you go, well, I want to be like these guys. This is what I've come here to do. And everybody is at a very, very high standard and everybody works hard. But the good thing about a regiment, Lewis, is that they want you. You've just come. You're a new guy. But now you prove to them that you've got it. You've got what it takes. So now they want to invest in you. You know, they not only money wise, but, you know, courses and you know, and all the stuff that I've talked about regarding, you know, the, you know, DEMS and signals and, you know, joining air troop and these many, many other skills that you have to learn. But the good thing about it, they don't restrict you. They want you to be the best. It's not like you're the new guy and we'll keep him where he is. No, that they want you to be the best you possibly can. So it's really a nice feeling that you're among the best and you realize that. And you go, I want to be like them. And now that's kind of the, you know, the start of your Special Forces career. And you just go, wow, this is just wonderful. This is, you know, all of a sudden in your mind, you go, now this is why guys come up here and don't leave and don't come back. It's like when guys left Para-Reg and actually were succeed and got in the regiment, you would never see them again. And now I'm up there and I'm experiencing that. And it's like you grow, you go further and you can never go backwards now. For a start, you're too busy. You know, I used to pop back and see my friends back at Para-Reg, but now you're traveling the world and you're very busy and you're doing courses and tasks and what have you. But, answering your question, what was nice is that everyone, if you like, was a mentor. You know, I wasn't scared to go up to the old and bold and go, look, I'm not sure about this. Can you show me? And what is nice, but yeah, we understand. And they would always teach you. It would bring you up to their standard. And as long as you were receptive, you know, which everybody was, you know, you know that someday you would be as good as these guys. And do you know another thing I noticed, Louis, is that everyone had long careers up there. No one would just go up there for a year or two and then leave. Everybody had long careers. I think everybody realized, Louis, that this is my time. I know I did. I thought, right, I've worked hard for this, 2 selections. I've got here and I've thought, wow, now this is what I want to do. You know, I'm in the biggest sweet shop in the world and they're offering, you know, all of this. You know, we'd all come through as what we call the sausage factory. So we've all come through the same selection process and we call it the sausage factory. We've all come through and that joins you at the hip, so to speak. You know, you are now, start of your Special Forces career. You've come through it. And it's like a brotherhood. And now you're going, right, I want a long career up here. I want to do everything. You know, if I could, I would have joined every troop up there, mounted troop, military, boats, and I would have done them all, and I would have done every single course possibly. I did a lot up there over 20 years. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's a great environment. The work ethics and mindset is just immense. It's just great. They want you to be the best, and they encourage you to be. And everyone is very helpful. They will help you along. All you've got to do is ask. And as you can appreciate, when I first got there, you had the guys that had been in the Iranian embassy, and I remember talking to them guys, and they were telling me about it, and I thought, wow, these are the guys who want to be like. So you had mentors all around you, and all you had to do was ask.
And in terms of camaraderie and people, one question people asked us when I said you were coming on, someone asked me if you would have ever had any encounters with any of our former military guests. And I know we have some mutual friends in Mark Billingham, and I think we both know Paul Hughes and Chris Ryan. Would you have had any crossover with any of these guys at any point throughout your career?
Well, me and Chris Ryan, we were in the same squadron together. Okay. Yeah. Billy Billingham, Billy, I keep in touch with him now, and he encouraged me, in fact, to kind of write my first book. It was him. I remember being in touch with him, and I saw him at one of his shows, and he says, Des, why don't you do this? Why I encourage you to to write a book to do this. And you just mentioned a name, they're called Paul Hughes. And in actual fact, Billy introduced me to Paul, and Paul had been doing some work with Billy, and it was Paul who introduced me to Damian Lewis. And so all them guys there, yes, I know. And we worked together in the past. Me and Chris were out in the Gulf in the Bravo patrols. So Chris was in Bravo 20. I was in Bravo 30. And so, yes, we've all worked together at some time or other. And by the way, all them guys, they're all good guys. And it's, Chris himself, has got, he got out some years ago and has been very successful. And what is nice about Chris, he's shown encouragement. We've done a podcast together the other year. And yes, just to give it context, is that we're all mates. Years ago, we'd all gone through the same sausage factory, and we were all doing the same thing. And we're all kind of, wow, I wonder what's going to happen in the future. I remember saying that to one of my mates on selection. Wow, have we passed? Have we got through? What's the coming years going to bring? What's going to happen? And something, Lewis, when I look back, when I left Skyle at 15, which was a ridiculous age to leave Skyle, is that, if people just said to me, why don't you join the armed forces? And I said, don't be silly, I'm not joining the armed forces. I'm not going to have people shout at me and tell me what to do. So from me, wondering whether I'd join the armed forces, from me wondering when I would join the SAS, me wondering whether I would write books, and wondering whether I'd be on podcasts getting invited like this. No, I never thought it for a start. I didn't want to join the armed forces. Join Para-Reg? No, I was scared. I'm thinking, I don't like heights. Even today, I did, I go, oh no, I still feel vertigo. When they said, oh, why don't you think about joining the SAS? I used to go, I'm not going up there. Them guys are a bunch of nutters. I hear all sorts of silly things about them. I'm not going there. And then when somebody approached me then about books, firstly I said no. I said, no, I'm not bothered about writing books. And all them I have to be careful when I say no to things, Lewis. When I say no to things, I finish up doing it. It's been very unusual as far as the things that I've done because I didn't plan them. But what I do remember, Lewis, even though I said I didn't plan this route, is that I always had in mind's eye that I wanted to do something different. And if there was a basic thing that I had in mind, I always felt that I wanted to travel. And I always felt that I wanted to do something a little bit unusual. Well, I suppose you can't get any more unusual than the route that I followed, Lewis. But I have no regrets. As I said, I left school at 15. Luckily, I thought to myself, I need to get educated. Luckily, my education was the military. I joined the military 19, going on 20, 8 years in Para-Reg. Then I got really serious. And then I thought, right, let me see my remaining years out, okay, which was all in all 28 years. I went to the SAS, 20 in the SAS, 8 in Para-Reg. And then I went on to the circuit. That's life after the regiment, where you work out and, you look after VIPs, or you look after networks like ABC, NBC, CBS out in volatile countries. I did security for footballers, for some pop stars, and then I finished up writing books. And now I'm on podcast talking to you, Lewis. How does all of that work, And as I said, if people showed me a route that I was going to follow, I would say, don't be ridiculous. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm thinking, I don't want to do that anyhow. But when I look back and I saw that route, how it's kind of unfolded. And it's funny, life just seems to unfold in front of you. And I always look at it as the conveyor belt of opportunities. There's opportunities there, but it's up to you, Lewis, isn't it, whether you take those opportunities. So when I left school, I got the opportunity to go in the military, then Para-Reg, then SES, out on the circuit, looking after VIPs, and then books and the like. So still enjoy myself, Lewis, and it's nice now. And I always feel humbled when such as you said, people reach out and ask me questions, and it's quite nice. And I know why they ask me questions. They go, well, you've been in the military, you've got that experience, you've seen a bit, done a bit. So it's quite nice that they ask me, and I go, if you ask my opinion from the experience that I've had within the armed forces, this is what I think. Okay, but it's not sacrosanct, it's just my opinion. But I know we talked earlier on about a success format. I think within the SF community, if you like, there seems to be a format that we can, let's say, spills over into civilian life from the military. And I like to think I've been able to use that format to my advantage.
Yeah, and so 2 questions I want to ask you before we let everyone know where they can buy this book. The first question, and you kind of touched on it there, is since coming out of your military career, are there any habits or ways of living or traits that you've just carried on over into civilian life?
People talk about personal development and the likes. It is very, very big nowadays, and I think that's the term that we tend to use most often now. And in the armed forces, Lewis, personal development is just normal. We do it every day. For example, you get up early in the morning and you think about what you're doing tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. In the military, you tend to have 2-year stints, and then you have your planning for, you set goals. There's certain things, intentions that you want. You're planning. So it's personal development every day. You're in the military, generally difficult situations. You're bringing about positive outcomes. You're organizing people. It's very pragmatic. You're doing physical every day, and you're moving forward all the time. And that, if you like, is personal development in a nutshell, isn't it? You're getting up and there's a task to be done. You do a bit of brainstorming, right? How we're going to do this. And remember, in the military, wherever you are, whichever regiment you are, they want that task to be successful, whatever that task is. They want you to sort it out. You're brainstorming. It's difficult. Well, sort it out. And you go, right, get those guys, get them together, plan it, tasks coming up, whatever it is. Well, that's personal development. And yeah, it just spills over naturally into my everyday life. For example, if your audience will probably understand this, like this morning, I'll give this morning, I'm generally up 5, 6 o'clock. So get up early. That's one. Okay. So I get up early and I'm ready for the day. And guess what? Get the job done. And whatever that job is that needs to be done, get up early. Secondly, get the job done. Thirdly, I'm thinking of doing something physical. Okay. People say, yeah, but that's because you've been in the armed forces, you're indoctrinated. Well, and so what? I think everybody should do something physical. So I get up early. Okay. I get the job done, whatever that job is. Then I think of doing something physical. And then after the physical, I'm thinking of, healthy food. What I'm having for my breakfast, lunch, my tea, snacks in between. So eat something, which is healthy. So yeah. Then fifth, either pray, meditate, set goals. In other words, what's your psyche? Think about if you've got to do some meditation, think about the mind. If you're going to set goals, what is it? The goals, go over them. If you pray, well, sit down and pray. Quieten the mind. Whatever it is, sixth is that I like to learn things. So I do a bit of reading every day. It might only be certain articles that I've seen in a certain magazine that I need to read, or there's a book that I have, and I'll go, right, I've got to read this chapter. And I always want to learn something, so I read every day. It might only be half an hour, 20 minutes, but I want to learn something. And then lastly is cleanliness, clean your body, clean your clothes, clean the house, clean the car, clean whatever. So already, I've got about 7 things there. So get up early. Secondly, get the job done. Thirdly, think of something physical. Fourth, eat healthily. 5, meditate, pray, or set goals, and whatever it is, quieten the mind, learn something. I like reading. And then lastly, clean everything, and that, people say, oh yeah, but you're in the armed forces, you don't know. Well, I'll tell you something, I know people that can't even get out of bed in the morning, So for me, at 5, 6 o'clock, I tend to do them 7 things every single day. as long as other things. And then I've got things to do with the books, emails to send, talks. I want to be with people and family and meetings. So I can fill my day, no problems at all. And when you think about all them things that I've just said there, Lewis, all those are pretty positive things to do. You are moving forward. You are setting goals. Even if you don't write them down, and I do, I write my goals down. I learned that years ago. But your intention of what am I going to do tomorrow, next week, next month? What's my plans? What's my plans with this book? What physical wise? What am I? So it is that in itself. I do every single day. So from the military, I used to do that in the military all the time. And by the way, it's encouraged. And I just spill that over now into Civvy Street, if you like, in a civilian life. And I know we hear all sorts of stuff about the personal development or the law of attraction. And people say, Des, what is law of attraction to you? Well, to me, it's generally 4 things. It's hard work, it's consistency, it's focus, it's discipline. Lewis, I don't know anybody that's achieved anything of significance, that is, that hasn't put hard work into that. So first one, hard work. I don't know anybody that hasn't achieved anything without consistency. Okay. I don't know anybody that hasn't achieved anything without being focused. And I'm not on about, I'm on about focus, like a laser onto something. Okay. So hard work, consistency, focus. And then the thing that ties it all together is discipline. Okay. Is being able to follow it through. Is being able to do the task when you say you are going to do it. So hard work, consistency, focus, discipline. In a way, that's the law of attraction for me. And I think in the law of attraction, yes, you can, think about things and focus on things, and it works. But there's, I think everyone realizes that there's a massive action side to do it. Well, for me, the action side within the armed forces worked for me very well. When I left school at 15, academically, I had nothing. But when I joined the armed forces, 19 going on 20, is that the armed forces way of life is very pragmatic, Lewis. So for me, it was hand in glove. It was the round peg in the round hole. It really, really worked. I wasn't very good at sitting down at school and taking it in. Now, it wasn't that I felt that I wasn't good enough. It's just that I didn't apply myself at school. So I had the sense to know, Lewis, that I was going to have to educate myself one day. And luckily, when I joined the armed forces, that was my education. And so accidentally, if you like, I kind of find myself in the military. That was accidentally, thought, well, I'll give it a go. But once I got in, it kind of confirmed, this is suiting me. This is a practical way of life. This is pragmatic every single day. And that suited me. And then I had them few years then in Para-Reg, and it gave me more and more confidence. And then obviously then I thought, am I going to take my career seriously? And I've already told that story when I decided to go for the regiment, for the SAS. And it gave me that confidence of having those few years in Para-Reg, accumulating to about 8 years. But it was, like, for example, in Para-Reg, around about the 6th year, I was probably fit enough, but my mind, I wasn't in the right frame of mind. So it was only when I started coming up to the 7th, 8th year that the mind kind of developed. I got more mature, if you like, and I knew what was needed of me to pass selection. So I'd got the fitness now, but I'd got the strength of mind that we talked about earlier. And this only come about with confidence. So through leaving school at 15, going on to Para-Reg, realizing this could be a good career, then understanding as I matured, I can take this career further. And then when I went to the regiment and I got in the SAS, then I was opened up to the sweet shop. I'd come through the sausage factory. I was part of now the system, and I could see clearly then what I had to do. And this is why most guys have long careers up there, Lewis. And then if there's something that we've talked about there, you can see how this SF mindset, this drive, this determination, this, if you like, hard work, consistency, focus, discipline comes around, So I said to people, no, you don't have to join the army. You don't even have to join the regiment. But there is, as you says, there's certain traits that you see, and I just give it that one word, it's drive. Okay, it can encompass, the hard work, consistent focus, discipline, and many other things. But it's generally the drive that you see in our guys, okay, and that we can use within Civvy Street. And no, people say, yeah, but you've had 20 odd years of being in the military and what have you. No, yeah, all I'm saying is that there's certain things that you could learn from individuals, let's say, that have had a life within the military. And obviously my book then describes, about this. And within the book, Lewis, I got approached about doing a pure personal development book. And I remember talking to the editor of, the publishing company, and he agreed that why don't we do a stories of what I've done in the military, but I've kind of lessons learned, if you like. I says, and I then can prove to kind of people, if you like, that I've had certain experiences, and this is what I've learned from the experiences within Power Edge and within the SES. The book is focused on the hardness of, let's say, joining the Power SP company, and also how hard it was within selection. That's kind of the center of the book. But there's also stories along the book, and I've had lessons learned. This is what I learned from this experience. This is what I do now from this experience. So people can look at it as a book where they can just read and enjoy the stories, or they can look at it as a personal development book, or they can look at it as, God, this guy has laid it out that this is what he's learned from, let's say, the difficult experiences that he's had with a life within the military. So I'm hoping that people who purchase the book actually get that from it as I've described it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I mean, there's so much, and our audience know there's so much actionable advice to take from someone with a career like yours. I mean, even as you were talking there, something as simple as that 7-step morning routine you were talking through, I think no matter what someone's goals are, no matter what someone's life may look like, just implementing those basic 7 things. I mean, it'd be hard to find, the negative in there at all. I mean, those are 7 things that are going to bring you closer to whatever you're looking for in life.
Yes.
So I think that was amazing, and so much for our audience to take away. And we've barely scratched the surface today. So obviously there's so much more of this in your book that we will direct everyone towards. But before we do that, my last question for you, and I ask this to every guest that comes on the show, whether you are former SAS or you're a Hollywood actor or you're a doctor, I ask the same question. And that is, right now for Des Powell, what makes life worth living?
My girlfriend said to me the other day, she says, Des, you seem really relaxed nowadays. And we joked about me never going to go through a midlife crisis. I remember one of my friends once saying that, Des, you're never going to go through a midlife crisis. And I said no. And I think I've recognized with the stories that I've told you, Lewis, that I seem to recognize that as my life, and still is, and I'm enjoying my life, is as it's unfolded, I think I made the most of everything. I took positive advantage of joining the military, then Power Edge, SAS, and so forth. And I think I've managed to enjoy the things that I've done. And so therefore, I today, the Des Powell that you see now is very content, very happy, very relaxed, because I feel that I've done what I've wanted to do. Yes, there's still stuff on the horizon. My girlfriend said, why are you surprised that you're writing books, Des? She says, a person like you and your friends within the military, they've always got other mountains to climb. There's always something on the horizon. There's always something else that you've got to apply yourself to. So she says, this really is your project, isn't it? The books, the talking, the speaking, giving advice. And she says, so, don't be surprised that you're always going to do this. I don't think, even though you are content, she says, I don't think you will ever be content just to kind of do nothing. You're always having to do something. And it's funny, when they approached me about doing the first book, I was living in the Middle East, and I thought, I said no at first, because I had this vision that I'd had a life of 1,000,000 miles an hour. Now, don't get me wrong, I chose that 1,000,000 miles an hour within the regiment and enjoyed every minute. But I'd now kind of retired. I was living in the Middle East and I was doing what I wanted to do. And now I had this vision that, oh, is it going to speed up again? Is it going to go back up to 1 million miles an hour? But I said no. But then I had friends around me who said, Des, that was then, this is now. Come on. It might be time for you to write your first book and then a second book come about. So answering your question, I think for me, being happy in life, and I was talking to one of my sons the other day and he says, how you doing, Dad? I said, it's one of the happiest I've been, and he says, oh, great. It's great. And I think happiness to me is contentment, is not having any regrets, is leaving it out there, is doing the best you can. Sometimes you're not always successful. Sometimes it don't always work out the way you want it to be. But do you know something, Lewis? If you give it your best shot, whatever it is, if you give it your best shot on a certain task or a goal, and it doesn't turn out the way you want, as long as you put everything into it, you feel better. How many times have, let's say, you've done an exam and you didn't revise for it? I know once I did it, and you go, and you failed it, and you go, actually, that was down to me. I didn't give it my best shot. So I always give everything my best shot, and that's whether you win or whether you fail. So answering your question is that I feel my best when I give everything my best, and it just makes me feel content. So for people out there, I always say to them, don't hold back in life. Don't sit on the fence. If you feel that you've got to do something, well, then do it to your best ability. And I point out, you don't have to join the military. You haven't even got to join the SAS. But just feel content that you have done the best you can. So for me, I don't watch much television. I don't like watching it, but I like the odd documentary and whatever. So for me, I have a treat at the weekend to sit down and relax. I'll watch a documentary or something of my choosing, and that's like me putting my feet up and relaxing. It's like a payback because I'm generally busy most of the time, and through the week. And as I say, my girlfriend says, you're particularly relaxed nowadays. You seem particularly happy. And I go, yeah. In other words, Lewis, I think I've done everything that I wanted to do, and I've still got more things. But no, do I want it to go to 1 million miles an hour like it used to be? No. I think I'm quite pleased with the books that it's going on about 30 miles an hour, and I quite like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad to hear it. That's so heartwarming to hear, and I'm so happy for you that you're at this place in your life where you feel that content and happiness. It's amazing. And for all our audience now who's watched or have listened along to this episode, and they want more from you. Well, like I said, we've scratched the surface. There's so much more to this. Where's the best place for them to go out and find SAS, My Trial by Fire, and get a copy for themselves?
The easiest way, I have my own website now, and it's the official Des Powell website. I think most people now just go on Google, don't they? If you knock up official website, Des Powell, my website will come up, and it'll show you my 2 books on there, and it'll show you some of the things that I'm doing talks-wise and how they can get in touch with me. But that's the easiest way. Or they can go directly to Amazon. But if you go to my website, it links you through to that anyhow. And you can see the first book there, and it gives you bios, and you might find the website quite interesting anyhow for some of the things that I've done on what I'm doing and what's coming up as well. So that's probably the easiest way to get it.
Amazing. Well, I'll leave that link in the show notes below. So everyone listening, watching right now, head below, click the link to the Des Powell website, and you'll find that right there. And you can explore more there. Des, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. This hour and 15 minutes has flown by. I feel like I could talk to you for 10, 20 hours, but we have to wrap up at some point. So I hope we get to do this again. But thank you so much for this hour. It's been thoroughly enjoyable and a real privilege.
Lewis, you're welcome. Thank you very, very much for inviting me on the show. And yeah, let's do it again sometime, shall we?